Welcome back to Preacher Handshake. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Evan, and we're your hosts.
This week on Preacher Handshake, we talk with Reverend Dr. Jamie Washam.
Reverend Jamie pastors the First Baptist Church in America in Providence, Rhode Island. This church remains committed to the gospel of Jesus Christ and Roger Williams' founding vision of soul liberty. A native Texan, Reverend Washam earned degrees from the University of Texas at Austin, Harvard Divinity School, and the Vrije Universiteit of Amsterdam. She was ordained an American Baptist minister through the Samuel Stillman Association in 2001. She makes her home with her family in Rhode Island. Prior to pastoring in Providence, she served churches in Chicago and Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. She was the president of American Baptist Churches of Wisconsin in 2013 to 14, and since January 2020, she has served as the elected president of the American Baptist Home Mission Societies. As an agent of God's love in the universe, she considers it an honor and joy to follow in the way of Jesus in the church gathered by Roger Williams. I met Jamie a couple years ago and was struck by how she was able to carry this preparedness, professionalism, and this kind of deep, nerdy love of the scripture and Baptist heritage and history. In pastoring at the First Baptist Church in America, she stands in a pulpit that has been there for a really long time and is deeply connected of the work of soul liberty and religious freedom and religious liberty with history that has shaped our nation. And she's continuing in that legacy today.
Yeah, so I was really excited to have a conversation with Jamie. I met her a couple of years ago and was really impressed with her, and then have listened to her preach online. And then she pulls up with this sermon about Christian nationalism, which is, on my heart and my mind and a part of my community. And so it was really exciting to hear just the way that she's processing this with her faith community, how she's rooting it in the Baptist tradition, and just the way that she kind of weaves the history of the denomination and the text and the culture was really beautiful. So it was a great conversation.
Yeah, and as always, you can listen to Jamie's full sermon through the link in our show notes, and I would really encourage you to do it. It is a powerful message and a message we need to hear today.
We hope you enjoy our conversation with Reverend Dr. Jamie Washam.
So welcome to the podcast. Jamie, we're so glad that you're joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here.
So we like to ask all of our guests, what is your relationship to preaching? Is something you always wanted to do, you've always loved, a highlight of what you do, or kind of a necessary part of pastoring?
I consider it such a privilege. It was not something I initially had my sights set on. I grew up in a context with great preachers, none of whom were women unless they were missionaries, but then that was your testimony. And it was usually on a Wednesday evening prayer meeting or Sunday night, maybe from the floor, not the pulpit. So I didn't imagine myself as a preacher, but my parents are teachers, so I think I always thought I'd be an educator. That was sort of the path that I went on. And I think that still is part of my way of, I probably am a teaching preacher a bit. But the first time I preached, I remember going back to my place afterward and thinking, oh, the next time I use this text, this is what I'll say, or, oh, I should have approached it. And I had this very palpable sense that this was significantly different than writing a paper for one person who would read it and it would go in a file somewhere. That this was, so I was already like, oh, okay, when I do this. And so I went home and noticed that and thought, oh, this is something else. And I really just consider it a privilege. I love to do it. I feel like it's an ongoing conversation with people, and particularly when you pastor them, that affects it gives a different texture to what you will say, because you know how it's going to land differently, perhaps in some hearts, some you don't. And I just feel like one of my preaching professors, John Shelby Spong, talked about how we should have enough respect for the act of preaching that if we aren't prepared, we should just have the humility and chutzpah to say we are going to have a 15-minute silent meditation rather than filling that time with some ill-prepared something. I remember him saying, how many people are sitting in your pews? For how long are you speaking? Do the math. That time is really valuable. How dare you not use it wisely? So all that to say is it's really delightful, and I'm kind of amazed that people come back every week.
I know the feeling. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow, I love that. What care you're giving to your congregation.
Mm.
Can you tell us a little bit more just about them and what the context for this sermon is? Who are these people you're preaching to? What are they like?
Yeah, certainly. So I have been the pastor of the First Baptist Church in America for a decade now. It's the church gathered by Roger Williams in 1638 here in Providence. And it's a lovely community of people. In some ways, we're a small downtown church, like a lot of those. I never thought I'd have parking lot envy. We have a driveway. Um, and because of our, we're nestled between Brown University and the Rhode Island School of Design, and you can see the state capitol building from the meeting house. And we refer to it as the meeting house. It's very much a community space where a lot of things happen. And so the congregation itself is full of educators, be it nursery school or professors. And so they kind of have that spirit amongst themselves. And because of the historic nature of this congregation, we get a lot of visitors on a regular basis. People who want to come here, and I have a pretty good pastor dar now, where like someone comes in and they just have a certain, like they have a presence, and I'm thinking they know the third verse, and pretty good at that, and that's also a delight. So there are people for whom I know normally would not come and listen to what someone like me would have to say, but they do so because they want to be in this place. And so I am aware that we have our regular folks who are here on a regular basis, wherever that's every week or every month. Everybody's got their own particular orbit, whatever the length of that is. But then we also regularly have, particularly in the summer and in the autumn, a lot of visitors, a lot of tourists who come through. And so that's really delightful. I mean, they come from all over the world, and it really spans the spectrum. And I, the hope is that we would be able to always be truthful in preaching the gospel, and also do so in a way that people from many different places can still feel that they catch that reflection as well. Yeah.
Context to, I mean, one, for all your educators and that education background you have, I'm sure is a real gift. But then two, to also have that kind of always thinking about the tourist as congregant, as passerby.
Or maybe I think tourist maybe isn't the word I would use. I should say members of members of Church Big C, right? Because
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's what we are, and that's what that reminder is. And our our building is old, and we lean into that, so we don't have the capacity to play pre-recorded music. So we sing hymns from hymnals. We have a choir. We have an organ. So there's a certain kind of uh, it is a worship style that is not for everyone, but it is for those for whom that it is meaningful, right? So so there is that piece of it as well. So I mean, it's really lovely, because it's also, I think we get a little glimpse of the realm of God every week. I mean, we're supposed to practice that on Sunday morning, and from what I hear, heaven's a mixed neighborhood, and so it's
Yeah.
good that we practice.
Can you tell us a little bit about your sermon prep process, what it typically looks like?
Yeah. I begin by praying that I will be able to deliver the message that the people need to hear. So that's where it starts, and that I'll get out of the way. I begin then with the text, that I'm going to use, and that informs where I go from that. I spend usually at least a good chunk early in the week getting all that figured out, doing the research. When was it written? Why? All that, all that sort of stuff. And I like to read what, different commentaries. There's people I look into, and I'll look and see, have I preached this before? I mean, I've been doing this more than 20 years. So what did I say last time? Do I still agree? I mean, because the context of when it was written and by whom and for whom is going to be the same, but where I am is really different, or my community is really different. And sometimes I think, ooh, I said that. I don't know. Or like, oh yeah, that still lands. Or so that's always kind of interesting just to see how that's different. I'm not a lectionary preacher usually. I'm more of a selectionary. But I will sometimes use the lectionary at certain times of year, because it is something really lovely about preparing in conversation with a whole lot of other people for the same thing. There's a lot of great resources out there when you do that. But then you also miss some hidden gems, some real deep cuts. Like, you're never going to have Balaam's ass, right? That's just not going to happen.
Right.
And so I also really like to do a sermon series. And I find I really like the muscle that flexes. And that's more like making a stew rather than a stir fry every night. And I like to know what's coming, and I could think, oh, here's the illustration that it might work this week, but it would really be great if I save it for that week down the road. And I find that people like to know what's coming, and they're, I'm going on vacation, but I'm coming back. When is this gonna? I mean, and so it makes it kind of as an incentive for all of us. And we draw people from a lot of, like, some people are like OG Baptist, and other people have come here from other denominational backgrounds. And so some people who didn't grow up in Baptist contexts maybe aren't as biblically literate. And so sometimes they have said, I went home and read the whole book of Ruth. Are you kidding me? I didn't know that stuff was in there. Or, I did a series on the book of Judges, because someone had said to me, oh, I think I've heard you say something like that before. And I was like, oh, challenge accepted. I am going to find something else to say that I have never said. And so I thought, I've never done Judges. And we went, I mean, it's like South Park does Veggie Tales, and it was pretty grim. But they loved, but it was challenging for me. And sometimes it was like, let this be an example for what not to do. But that process, I think, engages people in a different way and me in a different way. And so, you think about it. So there's a whole series of folks I'll read, and just to get some insight into what's happening. And then I have to print it out, and I walk around with it, and I scribble all over it, because I can't edit on a document in the same way. And I'm hearing stuff all week long, and people who love me know that it's going to be in my pocket. We may be at dinner, we may be at a party, we may be somewhere, and I'm like, I'm writing it on there and kind of figuring it out. And I usually will kind of over prepare, and I will have a couple of different ways it might go. And when I'm up there, it's sort of a choose your own adventure, depending on, like, are they really with me? Can I go like deeply into this extra bit that I think is really pretty germane and enriches this whole thing? Or are they definitely onto their grocery list? Do I need to move along? And so I kind of on the fly figured that out. How the Spirit will edit as well. Like, suddenly stuff will come out of your mouth that wasn't in there at all. And otherwise, sometimes I'm looking down like, no, that whole page, we don't need that. And I'm kind of trying to look ahead and make sense of that as I go along. But I like to have all that figured out before I get up there. Because again, I don't want to waste people's time. I don't want to get up there and not know where I want to go. Peter Gomes was at Memorial Church forever in Harvard, and he taught preaching. And he used to say, don't give me a string of pearls. I want a solitaire. Just give me a solitaire. Like, what is the thing? Like, what is the thing? And sometimes you have to kill your darlings, because the illustration, the story that we're like, oh, this is the juicy bit. It doesn't, it's not, it doesn't help. It actually distracts. You have to take it out, so such it is.
I
Preaching.
appreciate the care that you're giving to like being very particular about what's being preached. And also willing to like bring the vibe down at a party because sermon prep, right?
You never
Well,
know, like overheard, like, oh, I'm not going to cite that one, but like, that's pretty like grocery store, someone's passing by, you hear a little something.
well, today we are looking at a sermon you preached on July 7th, 2024, based on Galatians 5:13 through 15, and it's titled Freedom for, Freedom from.
Yeah, and you make use early on with this quote from Kurt Vonnegut to help your congregation kind of wrestle with this idea of Christian nationalism in his words. So I want to listen to that as we get started.
Sure.
Kurt Vonnegut said, for some reason, the most vocal Christians among us never mention the Beatitudes. But often with tears in their eyes, they demand that the 10 Commandments be posted in public buildings. And of course, that's Moses, not Jesus. He says, I haven't heard one of them demand that the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, be posted anywhere. Can you imagine? Blessed are the merciful in a courtroom. Blessed are the peacemakers in the Pentagon. Give me a break. If your version of Christianity wants to put the 10 Commandments in schools, but to take free lunches out of them, then you are worshiping something other than Jesus. Legislation promoting these kind of ideologies is being introduced across the country, and we, as Christians, have a unique obligation to speak out against it. Speak out and be clear about what soul liberty, soul freedom really means. Because if it is not true for all of us, then it is not authentically true for any of us.
I love how your clarity and your energy comes forward as you call us to stand against Jesus being used for partisan politics, and amen to that. I'm curious how you've navigated doing that in a moment when it seems like everything is perceived as partisan, and like to add to the mix that you have this sort of influx of people from all over Big C Church. How does your preaching navigate those things when you know the reaction to it, even if it's just a Jesus issue, might be so inflamed?
I take it as a given that a lot of people will leave a little grumpy with me. I endeavor always to back up whatever it is I say in the text and to ground it in the scripture. And, not thus saith Reverend Jamie, but here it is in the text. And I find it is more effective for me to just pose some questions and just let that silence kind of unfold. I don't know if you ever listened to Le Show, Harry Shearer. Anyhow, he's this radio guy. He does a lot of voices. Like anyhow, he's kind of an interesting thinker. But he just uses silence really well in his programming to a discomforting degree. And sometimes people are like, is she having a moment up there? I mean, but if you really just let people do it, you don't have to actually say all the things. You can say, here's what the text says. Here's what is happening. And, I think for me, that's very much in the tradition of Jesus, very much in the tradition of Roger Williams, to say, I'm not telling you, but I will be very willing to lay out a series of cases for you and to say, here's what the text says, So if that makes you uncomfortable, Jesus, right? So.
That's a great approach. You do it so effectively. I also love how you include Roger Williams in his story and his vision that not only shaped our country, but is the bedrock of the church that you pastor. So I want to share that clip as well.
In October of 1635, Roger Williams was banished from Massachusetts for harboring new and dangerous opinions. The following January, he fled to what we now know as Rhode Island, then Narragansett and Wampanoag country, where he received refuge. And he continued to develop those ideas that we now recognize and enjoy as religious liberty and the separation of church and state. And maintaining these ideals of freedom for and freedom from religion requires participation and vigilance. It's not just going to happen.
So these days in my congregation, I found that most folks are coming, do not have a Baptist background. They don't have any of this Baptist history, and even those with a Baptist background, to be honest, they're probably not going to come in with much of this history. I think that's probably typical across denominations. So how do you see the role of bringing in that denominational history and education as active within your preaching? And how regular do you bring forth these distinctions in the ways you communicate?
Well, first, I will say when I listened to that, I should say this is still Wampanoag and Narragansett land. I made it sound like it was just when he jumped off the ship here, but okay, just to back up. So I do bring this stuff back up pretty regularly because, again, I think of myself as a teaching pastor in a lot of ways, and the only way we know our stories is if we tell them, and if we don't, then we allow someone else to tell our story for us. And I do not think that the prevailing perception of Baptists in the wild is of those who will go to the mat for religious liberty, even though you have the Baptist Joint Committee who are doing phenomenal work, and you have all these different organizations who are doing this sort of thing. But I think that in this moment, we have the temptation is to cede this to other voices. And so if I disagree with the characterization that is out there, then what am I doing to change that? And Renee Colson said something to me really wise a long time ago in the context, she was talking about in the context of thinking about churches working through any kind of hardship. But her suggestion, and I've used it ever since, is in each congregation, we can inspire ourselves to where we go next by looking at where we are, where we have come from. What is our DNA, and what is the story of who we are, and what have we done in the past when things were challenging, and how does that inform where we are in this moment and how we move forward and how we will move forward, right? The given is that we will. And so it is a profound privilege for me in this place whenever I'm feeling particularly timid to say, Jesus Christ, Roger Williams, right? These people did not, they did not give in to timidity. And when I remember that, and when I remember the context of my call to this community, there were a couple of instances where in the process, had I known that they were going to come, you never know when they're going to just show up and listen to you preach, like you have a stealth search committee. And had I known, I would have dialed it back and played it safe and all these things. And I didn't have an opportunity to do so. And I'm reminded that they didn't call me here to play it safe, and that Jesus didn't ask us to be lukewarm. And the best place to get run over is when you're walking down the middle of the street. And so I find that people respond to someone whose yay is yay and whose nay is nay. And that goes further. And so when I candidated for this position, I talked about religious liberty because I take this stuff really seriously. I nerd out on these Baptist distinctives. And I think that part of one of the things we do in the pulpit is give our people language for what they intuit, but maybe can't articulate. And I think that is an ongoing gift that we give our people, is that we say, here is a way to put this into words. Perhaps it may be something you're just kind of feeling or you're sensing, but we give people sometimes language for that sort of thing, so that we are able to respond, and not telling people how to feel, not telling them what to think, but giving them equipping them so that they can articulate that themselves.
Yeah, I really love that you're giving them the language and also the grounding too, right? Like you're rooting them in a time and a place and a history.
Right.
That's really beautiful.
Well, and I would also just say that, and to remind ourselves that it wasn't particularly easy for them then. So if we think that we are unique in our struggle or finding this challenging, we should say, well, then that is evidence that we are on the right path. And, I think that there are a lot of Baptists who would forget some of this history and wouldn't remember this. And it is I think it's our role to lift that up and to remind ourselves and the broader community of who we have been and who we are, I think, still called to be in this moment.
Yeah. So you make an interesting comment about the January 6th insurrection that I'd like to listen to.
Sure.
After the January 6, 21 attack on the Capitol building and on democracy itself, we as a nation have been taking stock. We're asking ourselves important questions. What have we learned? Where do we go from here? How do we prevent something like this from happening again? That's right, buddy. Christians are engaging in this necessary self-reflection as we grapple with the fact that most of the people who participated in that event on January 6th believed that they were doing God's will. The motivations and contributing factors that converged on that day are multifaceted, but we know that Christian nationalism was immediately recognizable as a factor in the attack. Photos of the rioters holding up signs like "Jesus saves" and reports that they were waving the Christian flag as they went into the Senate chamber are textbook examples of this ideology that merges American symbols with Christian symbols. And purporting to act in Jesus' name, they used Christianity as a kind of a mascot, trying to lend credibility and social acceptability to their terror. For this worldview, the Bible and the church aren't symbols of faith, they are weapons in a culture war.
Wow. So you really take a moment to remind your congregants and, as you say, even just passersby that are at your church, that this Christian nationalist movement or religious extremists believe they're doing the will of God, believe that they are, enacting what it is to be Christian. So why did you think that that was a reminder people needed?
Well, if it keeps happening, then apparently we haven't internalized this yet. And I think it's always confusing when people take a grain of something that we agree to be true and then code it in a whole lot of other things that are a distortion. And it can be, I grew up doing Bible drills and all that sort of thing, but like the idea of chapter and versing somebody still stresses me out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I can say, but I think that there is a way that we weaponize our faith. And if it becomes a bludgeon where you are doing harm in order to safeguard the tenets of your faith, then you need to check yourself. If we need our government to ensure that we are good Christians, we have already lost. And if we expect that to be the body, then we are making an idol out of that. And we would best be served expending our energies elsewhere. Why don't we get our own house in order? I think it's something about a little log and a speck before we try to go fix somebody else's state house. So I think until the church can do all of that, I think that if we just busied ourselves with that would be sufficient. And yes, call out those in power and continue to do so, but to do it in a way where if you find yourself drawing blood in Jesus' name, then we have gotten far, far from the way of the gospel as I understand it.
Yeah. Church historian Jamar Tisby talks a lot about this idea that sometimes Christians who are against Christian nationalism try to distance ourselves from it, and it's to the detriment of that. So being able to really kind of say, no, this is our mess too in some ways, and we've got to address it. We can't let somebody else handle it.
And I do think that I appreciate you naming that, because I think in particular Christians, Protestants, white Americans really need to own this. And it isn't enough to say, I'm not that. It is insufficient to say, I'm not it. I'm not those guys, not your kind of, okay, but I want to hear who you are and what you are doing. That is far more enticing to me than expending all your energies denigrating and telling me what you aren't. I mean, there is a time and a place to define and draw bounds, but I think I would be much more interested in saying, okay, so how are we living into this call? Show me what this actually means to you. You said it's not that, but show me what it is. How are you living with your neighbor? How are you recognizing that love of God and love of neighbor aren't different things? So this is your neighbor too, right? And I am really indebted to one of my members, my moderator right now, very gently and concisely called me out on my pronouns. And he said, I keep hearing you use pronouns I don't think you mean to use. You keep saying us and them. And I think you mean us and we. And I was like, oh, why are you so right? And so, so that is the humility of the gospel, is that how do we do that in a place where it's not particularly welcomed and it's seen as weakness and stupidity? I mean, same as it ever was. So how do we do that with joy and integrity? And again, I think nobody considers themselves a villain. Nobody thinks that they're doing this, that and so, so how do we have some compassion to give? I mean, I know that when I'm painted into a corner, and my back is against the wall, I'm unlikely to show any kind of vulnerability. So how do we practice this in tangible ways? It's not easy. I'm not going to pretend like I have it figured out.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm figuring it out in those silences when I just let it stretch out and ask questions. But yeah.
So you mentioned kind of one major problem with merging religion and government.
We know that government sponsorship actually diminishes faith. This is part of the reason why Roger Williams left organized religion. Because in addition to being harmful to minority faiths, government-sponsored religion is actually not very good for the religion that it endorses, because the state tends to magnify the elements of the religion it agrees with while suppressing the voices and perspectives of those that criticize the state. We can live together in religious pluralism and civic harmony without sacrificing our deeply held beliefs. And protection of plurality allows us to flourish in a religious diversity in this country. And we're frankly better for our differences. Harvard's Diana Eck, up the hill, up the road, talks about how we should distinguish between pluralism and diversity. Diversity is just something that happens. Like, you just live in a community and it happens to be diverse. You've got nothing to do with that. But pluralism is active engagement. It's a positive engagement that includes respect for other identities, positive relationships with other communities, some type of commitment to the common good, a desire to actually know one another beyond sound bites.
So this comment really acknowledges to some extent that there is pluralism and differences of opinion even among different Christian perspectives. And I can hear the comment that, with an organized religion, that some of that really goes away, and that maybe could be a good thing. We're on the same page in Orthodox and Orthopraxy, but explain a little more about why you think this pluralism, even among Christians, is something we need to fight to protect.
I think that it is a check on our own certainty. When we all believe that we all believe the same things, we never really need to consider them. And it is tempting to make an idol of our belief system and supplant the divine with what we have believed about the divine. And it's so much easier to then follow that system. I mean, I think Jesus pretty clearly was trying to move that aside. And it might save time. but I don't think that it ultimately serves us. And I think that when we come up against those with whom we disagree, we give ourselves room. I mean, I don't think doubt is a bad thing. I think, as Frederick Buechner says, it's the ants in the pants of faith, that it is the thing that kind of keeps us moving. I'm always reminded of our fellow Baptist, Reverend Dr. Jonathan Malone, and he talks about how in a church he served, he had this member who voted no on everything. Even if he agreed with the thing, he voted no on everything because he wanted to preserve the possibility that someone else could have dissension without it being, everybody clutching their pearls, because there would be a precedent of people voting no or saying, no, I disagree. And he gave room for dissent and doubt. And I think that is healthy, as discomforting as it can be, because in the Quran, it says that that our Creator could have made us all the same, but didn't, on purpose, so that we would do the work of coming to know one another. And there's this concept of our encountering God at best in the in-between, in the spaces in between, in these interstitial moments in community. And y'all serving communities, God bless them. It is sometimes the most remarkable joy, and it is sometimes such a challenge. And the joy teaches us a lot, but so does the challenge as well. And so I think, again, it is a check on our own certainty. And that is that in and of itself is really valuable.
I'm married to a Baptist who that says her middle name is Dissent and is one of those vote no all the time people, which, as the spouse of the pastor, can sometimes be frustrating. And yet I'm grateful, and she does. You speak about the current cultural context, and you make this distinction between loss of privilege and loss of liberty, and I'd love to listen to that clip.
Our country is experiencing the decline of Protestant privilege, and some Christians confuse the loss of privilege with the loss of religious liberty. And it is crucial to distinguish between the loss of privilege and the loss of liberty, because they are not the same.
So appreciate you making this distinction, because I feel it kind of in the air all the time because of our history, and certainly the last half century or whatever. There really has been this openness to pluralism as long as we're still number one kind of sense, right? Which is not really pluralism. Why did you want to bring this forward in your context? Why do you think it's so important right now to name this?
Because I think we act as though it's pie and it's finite. And I had a wise woman in one of my communities, Betty Day, and she talked about how she had always been a proponent of change until her Parkinson's forced her body into choices that she wouldn't have made on her own. And she was mad because she had to put in this chair that she thought was ugly that could help her get up. And she said, I realized that I liked change that I chose, right? And I think that's true for a lot of us. And so when changes happen and it isn't what we would have anticipated, or isn't maybe the arc that we saw coming, I think people can read that as, well, why am I not getting mine? Again, it's like those pronouns. Like, okay, are we getting ours, or am I, and has the Christian message ever been about, I mean, I think that we as Christians, I think in our Protestant moment and how we interpret it, I think that there is a temptation to act like salvation is this personal endeavor, and it never has been. Like, I said this magic prayer and I'm gonna see Jesus with my golden ticket when I die. And I believe that it is only heaven when we all get there, and we all want each other there, and we all help each other along. And if we act like it's just about me getting my piece, then we're missing it. And that's still like, then we need to have a little more heart tenderizer going on to open that up a little bit more.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. You talk a little bit about being a counter witness to Christian nationalism, and I'd like to listen to that as well.
Don't allow this ideology to go unchecked as the only visible and vocal public representative of our faith, or people will believe its leaders when they say that they speak for all Christianity. If they don't speak for you, then what do you need to do? What? Oh, say it again? Okay, because if I can barely hear you in here and we purportedly all agree, how are they going to hear you out there? It is up to us to be present in our communities, to offer both a counter witness and a positive prophetic voice for the values and policies we believe in. It is not enough to say, I don't believe in that, you're doing it wrong. Nuh-uh. What we need to offer beyond that is a positive, constructive alternative. Yes, call out what is not accurate and offer up an alternative in its place, where we live into this prophetic voice for the values and policies that we believe in, where we expand equal rights for all, regardless of their race or their religion or their identity, their income, their physical or mental health, their zip code.
I love this comment about being a counter witness. It seems to go a little bit back to what you were saying earlier, is we're not just defining ourselves about what we're against, but also what we're for. So, just kind of pastorally, practically, how do you practice being a counter witness?
Well, I think that it's gonna look like a whole lot of different things. Sorry, the sunlight's doing its thing. I think about when Jesus cast some ill spirits out of someone and said, unless, when you clean house, unless you put something else in that house, they're gonna all just go out and invite their friends to come back to this nice clean place, right? So we are called by Jesus to do this. So I think it's by having real relationships with people. It's Travis Norvell writes about this in really beautiful ways, about just being outside in your community. He's always on his bike, but know your neighbors, like listen to your members, go visit them, be present to them, know your community. Don't expect people to show up to you. Go to where they are and then listen and see what matters, and have real relationships with people in real time. I mean, we're trying to just do stuff with other congregations in other faith groups, and just get our people together and have them meet in real time. But that has grown out of relationships I've had with leaders of those communities, where we've been getting together for, every month or so for a period of time. So we have trust with one another, so that, God forbid, when something does catch fire, we're not meeting for the first time. We will already know one another. And I think that it is one thing to run away from something, and it is very much something else to run toward. And people's motivation can either be fear or love. And I think that the gospel doesn't stutter which one that we're called. Don't be afraid and actively to love. So that's it right there. Love God and the one in front of you. And so show up for each other, and just be present, be available, have permeable membranes, I think. And I think a lot of it is don't just talk about it, be about it. And that's going to be a lot more effective. And again, giving people a lot of doors and windows for how they can do that, because not everybody's going to do it the same way. And I think y'all are leaders of communities. You give people room to have ideas and to let them flourish, and they will look nothing like you imagine. You're like, oh, all right, that's what it does. And trust that the Spirit is working in ways that we can't orchestrate or intuit, and we can come alongside. I mean, I think about Kirk Byron Jones, The Jazz of Preaching, where he talks about how how so much of this is just improv and going along. And I mean, the words that I think of for all of the ministry and preaching is preparation and surrender. Right? You do all the things you can to get ready, and then you just release into whatever is going to happen. Yeah. Is there a siren going off? Is there a baby screaming? Who knows what is happening? Can you just roll with it? And and not be thrown off course, and actually work it into something that is in fact more cohesive and lovely for it. So yeah.
Yeah, what great reflections. I'm struck by our conversation, and that I keep thinking of the image of you pulling out the sermon at the party to make your notes, but that idea of the sermon process happening in community and with your people, and when you're at the hospital bed and when you're just visiting somebody, and how many times you've said, and then a church member said this, or my moderator said this. You're really modeling what that looks like to let those voices in that community shape you. So I'm really grateful for it, and it's been helpful for me. We have a few closing questions we ask everybody, and some of these make people uncomfortable and they don't like the wording. That's kind of the point of it. The first one is this: what are you most proud of about this sermon?
I don't think I said anything particularly new or original in this message. I mean, these are all things that far sharper minds have said more elegantly. But I think, we are sampler, remix collage artists, maybe as preachers, starting with the gospel itself. But so, I think if someone can leave saying, okay, I feel like I know better how to give voice to what I might just be sensing. And I leave here with a bit of hope and not just despair at what's going on, that I don't have to move this king size mattress by myself, that wasn't what my obligation was, that there's a community, and it's okay if I'm just doing this corner because there's all these other people doing there. So, how do we respond to nationalism? Okay, my neighbor over there does all the emails, and this one is a community health nurse, and this one is taking kids to swim lessons. And, so when we are able to do that, I think that, at its best, a sermon would help us to I say articulate what we intuit, but maybe cannot put into words. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there is anything that you could do differently if you would redo this sermon.
I mean, you always want it to be more streamlined, and I'm always like walking this line between wanting to nerd out and give people even more resources and point them to all the footnotes, which are there in what I have written down, versus, as my daddy always tells me, nobody's mad when you preach too short. So trying to balance those very different narratives. So, just trying to recognize that people, I think I go back and read old sermons from another generation, and there's just no, I mean, even if you were Dr. King, God bless him, I mean, my people be like, wow, he's gone on 40 minutes. And, thinking this is Dr. King, but who knows? I mean, for him, I think they would do it. But it's just a different, it's a different task. And so you have to consider that. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I relate with the footnotes. Here's the big one, the last one. Why do you think preaching matters today?
I feel like it is one of the few places where we come together and really wrestle with substantive things intergenerationally, interculturally. And I mean, have been so blessed with colleagues that I can sit alongside as church musicians, where we try to craft a whole service where, I mean, I don't believe that they will walk away remembering my sermon. They'll probably be singing that song, and those words will come up. So we really try to put it all together. And I think, preaching as a piece of that, it at best asks people questions, and it gives them room to just keep thinking. I think at its best, if people walk away and they're still cooking on it later, that's a good sign. And they're still, it's still working on them. It is the ideal. Yeah. And they come back later, like, what did you mean? Or where do we, and often, like, I'm always amazed. I mean, preaching can be super humbling. I was thinking about your name, the preacher's handshake, and how, when do we get that feedback from people? And I've had people come through and say, wow, that was a great message, Pastor. And I thought, I'm standing right by the guest preacher who actually is the one who delivered it. Or the Sunday when something caught fire on the altar and people came out and they're like, hey, it sure smells smoky. And I was like, there was a fire on the altar. And they're like, oh, you're such a kidder. Didn't even, I mean, so it was so humbling and liberating. I was like, oh, I can really say and do anything. I can set things on fire. And not all of them will even see that. And then also there are weeks when people leave and they say that was exactly, like some weeks, like you feel like, oh, that was the message. And some weeks you're like, I mean, and people will come through and say, here's this thing I heard that I really needed. And sometimes I don't think I even said that at all. And
Absolutely.
I am so grateful that there is always this interception between whatever I intend to come out of my mouth and what the Spirit has land in someone's receiving it, so that's always pretty amazing in that sense. It's always going to be bigger than us.
Yeah. Reverend Dr. Jamie Washam, thank you for your time. It's been an absolute joy to hear your preaching and talk to you about the craft, and keep on doing what you're doing, and the great work that you're doing, and the work you're doing to illuminate what we need to hear from the scriptures.
Well, I thank you for the privilege. This conversation has been so lovely. Like, I really love to think about this stuff. And can I just add a postscript maybe of something I'm thinking
Please.
about? You asked about the preparation and how it works. I think particularly when I was a cub preacher, and there's the discipline of writing a sermon and delivering it every week. I think early on, I think it's liberating to know, okay, I'm coming back next week. I don't have to say it all today. But especially if you're in a solo pastorate where you are it, and a way to make it stay fresh and not be exhausting for you or for them, and you never get to hear somebody else preach but yourself, or pray. And so to put yourself in contexts where you can hear some other kind of voice or some other kind of way of delivery. One of the privileges that I have now is being in a pulpit where people want to come and preach. And I find, and I've been speaking with my leaders that, what would it look like if every 4 to 6 weeks we were very intentional about there was someone else here, because I then can prepare sermons in a deeper way while doing pastoral care and all those things. And also I feel that I have an obligation to ask people to fill this pulpit who have historically not been the voices heard. And so we did a celebration of our congregation. It's 385th a couple years ago, and brought back anyone who had been a pastor here or who had been ordained here. And what was kind of amazing, the only living people ordained in this congregation right now are all women.
Wow.
It was 350 years of only men, and then it was like women. And I don't think they even recognized that until they were all standing there. And the church was like, oh, we didn't know we had kind of been a part of that, but here we are. And so that was, so that's a long postscript. But to say, but it's been a gift for me to be able to hear different folks, and I think for my people as well. And so it's a blessing that goes in all these different directions.
Absolutely.
So thank you again for this conversation. It's been a real joy.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to our conversation with Reverend Dr. Jamie Washam. If you want to keep up with Jamie, her work, or listen to her full sermon, check out the links in our show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like and follow us on whatever platform you get your podcasts, and share it with your friends. You can keep up with all things Preacher Handshake on our Instagram @PreacherHandshake, or email us your questions or preacher recommendations at preacherhandshake@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.